Hello, friends, everybody. Okay, so this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good because I like to remember some of these things sometimes. And if people that have came into my life are lucky enough that I like them enough to share these stories with them, sometimes I do. So I want to talk about I want to talk about a lot of my childhood stories, things that happened as I was growing up, very, very young. Um, because now that I'm at this stage in my life, I look back at some of that stuff and it always gives me a big smile. And it really makes me full of joy and remembering some of these things. Because now I understand. Okay, so when I was like, I'm gonna say between the ages of 4 and 5, I was in a school doing like preschool at the time, and I had this teacher. I never forgot her name though because she was like super sweet, you know, very very pretty. I remember that. She was young though. I think she was probably in her like early 20s. She wasn't much older than that, if my memory serves me right. It's funny how some things in our lives we can remember them very well, even though some of these things happen when we're really, really young. I think the brain is an amazing thing because I don't know. I've I talk to a lot of people and they don't remember certain things. They don't remember things, like it's almost like some people they can only go back so far and then they don't remember anything prior to that, and that's kind of weird to me, but I mean, I guess everybody is different when it comes down to memories and stuff like that, but I remember a lot of stuff when I was young. But these I remember because my mother told me these things too, after the fact and all that. So when I was in the school, um, this teacher saw that I was different from the other kids. Not in a bad way though, but she eventually, had my mom called in and she sat my mother down and she told my mother that, I was too smart to be in that class with that age group at the time. And then she told my mom that, she felt strongly that if I stayed in that specific preschool group of kids, whatever it was, that it would kind of like hamper my learning. She was like, he has nothing to learn here at this specific class. So she asked my mom if my mom was going to be okay that they moved me up. But the only issue was is that I was going to be with like older kids, the kids of the next class. They were like 2 or 3 years older than me, so there was a bit of a gap in age, so to speak. And back then, they used to do things like that. I don't know how it is today though. I know in some places it happens. They did it to my son when he was younger too. I remember that. Not that young though, but I remember they did that to my son as well, at some point. Uh, in Massachusetts, in the U.S. Yeah. So, yeah. So my mom said it. She was fine with it, and they ended up they ended up putting me on that class, and I remember my mom sitting down with me and explaining to me the whole thing, and I don't think I had a problem with it. As far as I can remember, I was fine with it. And it's funny because like these other kids, they were older than me, but nobody mistreated me, or you know, everything was fine. I felt home. I felt like I was at the right place. So that's an interesting, you know, little bit of my childhood there. But the part that I really wanted to talk about was that I think I was between the ages of like 7 and 7 and 10. Yeah, 7 and 10. We living in a farm. We were living in a farm at the time. This farm, uh, this was actually in my homeland, my home country, in Brazil, and I've been in the U.S. now since I'm gonna say it was 1996. It was when the Atlanta Olympics were happening. I moved to the U.S. It's a long story. Maybe I'll make a video about it if you guys, are interested. I'll make a video about it, I guess. But yeah, so I've been here since 1996, so I've been here for a while now. When I was between the ages of 7 and 10, we lived in this farm, and this farm was awesome. We had everything in this farm, like absolutely everything you can possibly have. It was completely self-sufficient in terms of food providing. It had everything. But the problem was this place was in like the middle of nowhere in Brazil, in the southern part of the country. It was in the boonies of the boonies. It was like, I'm telling you, when I tell you this was in the middle of nowhere, it was in the middle of nowhere. And the only people that lived there were a bunch of farmers. And the farms were pretty far from each other too. This was super low populated type of place. But I loved it. It was great. It was the best. It was absolutely the best. And it's funny because we've had that farm for quite some time, and eventually we ended up going back to it when I was much older. Um, I think we went back to that farm at some point when I was between the ages of like 16, 17, until I was in like my, yeah, well, maybe between the ages of 16 and 19. And then at that point we moved to a part. It was still in the same like area sort of like, but it was it was in a more like urban area. It wasn't in the boonies. Um, so the thing is, me and my older brother, we were like a year and 9 months apart from each other, basically. At the time, we had to ride our bikes to go to this school. This school was really, really far away from the farm that we were living on. My dad, he was working in a big town that was really far from where we were, so basically he wouldn't even be there where we were for the week. He would only come home on the weekends, and he would spend the week in the town where he was working. Yeah. So because the school was really far away from where we were, we had to ride our bikes to go to school every day. And this place was like it was either 14 kilometers or 17 kilometers away from the farm where we were. Um, you can do the math in miles. Just go to Google and get a conversion going if you want to know. But it's something like maybe 12 miles each way, maybe somewhere around there. Look it up if you want to know the exact number. It was far though for a kid that's 7 years old. And so we used to get up at around, I think it was like between 4:30 and 5 in the morning, and then we would leave the farm, no late than like 5:30 in the morning maybe, and it would take us, and I think school started probably around 8 in the morning. So by the time we got to the school, it was just about to start. That it took us that long to ride our bikes to get to the school, to be able to go to our classes and be educated basically. And it was like, so my mom would get up before us, and she would milk the cows. And but before, actually, it was kind of like at the same time, because what happened was, my brother and I, we would go and get pasture, cut this type of pasture. It was a special pasture, like it's not like grass. It was longer leaves. We would have to go out to the field, which was like right in front of the farm, and we would cut the stuff, bring it to the cows, feed the cows, and then my mom would go in there and milk the cows, and then we have breakfast, whatever, and then pack up, go to school every day. And the funny thing is, I remember, that I had this conversation with my older brother a long time ago, and I asked him, I was like, do you remember when we had to go, to school on the bikes and this and that, and just asked him other stuff about living in the farm, because I loved it. I loved every minute of it. He was like, yeah, I hated it. I hated that shit. And it's so funny how two people can have the same experience and feel completely different about the same exact experience, right? Like, he didn't like it. He didn't like it at all. I loved it. I think those were some of the best years of my life, and I do everything to go back to that, because what I liked about that was the simplicity of it. The fact that, we were just there, living off the land, nothing to worry about. We had everything we needed from the land. If we needed meat, we'd slaughter our own animals. We had cows, we had pigs, we had chickens, we had ducks, we had goose. And like, in terms of like fruits, we had so many different like trees with different types of fruits. We had like oranges, we had grapes, we had strawberries, we had blackberries, we had guavas, different varieties as well. We had corn, watermelons, melons. Um, what's the name of that thing that the root you pluck it off the ground and you make flour off of it? In Spanish you call it yuca. In Portuguese we call it aipim. But it's this root, right? You just you can clean it off, wash it off, peel it off, and then you can cook it. And it's so good, it's delicious. You can cook that stuff like a potato type of thing. Um, we had potatoes, we had like sweet potatoes, we had everything. And I used to fish. I loved fishing when I was young. I would go to the river, like right up, the river actually crossed the property that we lived in. It was a pretty large farm. So I would go into like to the river with my fishing pole, and I would be there for like 2 or 3 hours just fishing, and I was so good at fishing. I'm pretty sure I still am a badass fisher if I get a fishing pole and go back to it, because it was so natural to me. I love doing that stuff. And I used worms as bait, because that's the thing that fish loves the most. You can use bugs and things like that too, but for me worms are like the best thing. They love that shit. Anyway, I would fish. I would bring my bucket, grab water from the river. I would grab like 20, 30 fish and bring them home to my mom, and I'd be like, "Look, mom, look, I got all this fish." and, my mom always liked that stuff because it was like a kid's thing, you know. And then I would clean them up. Not only I would fish them, I would clean them up, remove all the fish scales, you know, open their gut, clean everything up, um, cut their heads off, and then my mother would just like deep fry them, and they were so good, you know. There would be times where I would just, you know, be at a tree for like the whole morning, just eating fruit off the tree. I come back home when it was time to have a meal, and then my mom would be like, "How come you're not eating?" "Ah, I'm all set, mom. I ate fruit all day." Stuff like that. I just like, life is so simple sometimes. There's no need to complicate anything. Like, when you're out there in nature, in your natural habitat per se, that's what I would call it, because we're all connected to this planet we live in. But how quick do we forget these things? It's very sad. It's very sad to me. That's why when I can, I really love going to the woods as much as I can. It started raining again today, so I was like bummed out. But it is what it is, so not much you can do. Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff when I was young. So this school thing, yeah, it and the thing is, here's the thing though, because it was so far away, and we had rainy season sometimes. Sometimes, you know, back then, and I'm talking about, you know, in the 70s, okay? Late 70s. There was no weather, you know, there was no weather, man. They couldn't predict any of that stuff. Any of they couldn't predict the weather in those days the way they can now. They just didn't have the technology to do it. So the weather could be looking fine when you went to school that morning, but then when you're going back home that same day, that could be like torrential rain coming down for hours. And that happened a lot. I remember that. And then the roads would be flooded. And these roads that we used to ride our bikes on to go to the school, they were not paved. It was dirt roads. So when those roads flooded, because there was no like there was no they didn't have, you know, manholes, any of that stuff, draining systems on those roads. There were no draining. There was no drainage. So when it flooded, it flooded. The roads became rivers, like literally. Like it'd be like sometimes, a meter and a half deep of water. It was rough sometimes. I ain't gonna lie, but when I look back at that stuff, it always brings me good memories and joy, and I laugh at it. But I remember my brother didn't like it. He wasn't a fan. Hell, sometimes you be going back home. The roads are all flooded. I would just toss my bike to the side of the road and just freaking swim on the roads for a little bit and just have fun with it and enjoy life in the process. I did all kinds of crazy things like that, and yeah, that happened a lot. Sometimes, when the stuff would flood too, um, you wouldn't be able to go to school for like a whole week or two, depending how bad the flooding was, and then that would like delay the whole school thing, and then sometimes the school year would take longer for some of us to complete than others, because most people that lived in those areas, they didn't have the means to go to school every day. Most people didn't even have cars in those places. They were all riding bikes or using horses or having a horse, pulling a chariot or something like that. That's how people moved around in places like that, in farmland in Brazil, in the late 70s. That's how it was. Cars were a luxury. I mean, my dad had his car, but he would go to the big city to work, and like I said, he stayed there where his mother lived, and he would be at her place. He would sleep there throughout the week while he worked there, and then on the weekends he come back to the family. And that's how it was. That's how we lived our lives that back then for a while. And then eventually we went to the city when one of my relatives passed away, and then we lived at that house for quite a while. I think from when I was like between the ages of like 10 and 16 or so. We moved around a lot, because my dad was always changing jobs, always, all the time. He would never settle with any company for extended periods of time. He was always switching jobs, always finding something better, making more money. That's the way it was. And yeah, fun times. I enjoyed every little bit of it, and I miss that a lot, today. Because I look back at that kind of stuff, and I'm like, wow, you know what? Life was so simple, but it was, it was, it was also so happy at the same time. There was completely drama free. Absolutely great. I loved it. So that's a little bit of my childhood background right there. I might make another video at some point, sharing some more stuff. I have so many things I could talk about. Um, change the subject a little bit, share share some of my, I don't know, humanity with others. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. That's gonna be it for this one, guys. That's gonna be it. Anyway, as always, I love you all. Hope you have a wonderful day, night, and yeah, share, subscribe, like, whatever. Same old, same old. Take care, guys. See you on the next one.